Good morning, purposeful people. Welcome to the Purpose Summit. Thank you for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to see everyone. So many of you deeply engaged with a sense of deeper purpose in these critical times. Let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, there was a so-called Big Bang. Cosmologist Jude Currivan told me it was neither big nor a bang. So it's gotten a lot of other names. One of my favorites, cosmologist Paola Zizi, calls it the Big Wow. And Sir James Jeans once said that the universe is much more like a thought than a machine. So let's call it the Big Wow. The grandest aha moment in the history of our universe at the very beginning. It got us started on this whole trajectory. And it was purposeful, I think. Lots of people think. Ervin Laszlo, one of the contributors and collaborators with the Global Purpose Movement, says purpose in the universe is a universal truth as well as a source of practical guidance. As far as being a universal truth, Laszlo describes in his latest book, on sale over here, The Intelligence of the Cosmos, that there are some 25 to 30 parameters of the universe, the speed of light, the mass of elementary particles, the force of gravity, and on, that are fine-tuned to 1/1000th of a degree or more. And that if the slightest fluctuation, one way or another, in all of these different parameters changed, the universe as we know it would not exist. So I think that sounds like there's some purpose in this. Something, some field of primordial consciousness perhaps, was thinking about something. Certainly a great degree of detail went into it all. This debate between materialistic science and a kind of purposeful universe seems to go on. I can't quite understand why. Sir Fred Hoyle, mathematician, physicist, once said, the chances of our universe and thinking beings such as ourselves evolving out of random mutations and the accidental accumulation of material happenings, the chances of that happening are the equivalent of a hurricane blowing through a junkyard and assembling a fully functional aircraft out of the debris. More mathematically speaking, cosmologist Lee Smolin once said that the chances of this accidentally evolving are 1 in 10 to the 40th power. Now that's a lot of zeros, but 10 to the 40th power is the equivalent of the number of atoms in the entire universe. So I think we can see that really the chances of us being here today, discussing purpose together, having evolved out of random chance, are indeed limited. So we're going to go with the safer option. We think the universe is purposeful. We think it has been from the very beginning, and actually now is the moment that it's really getting interesting. And at this point in time, we have plenty of crises worldwide. One of them is the stability, sustainability, the health, not only of our democracy in the United States, but of democracy worldwide. The Freedom House in Washington, D.C., which analyzes the states of democracy, has noted a very perturbing, disturbing trend. You know, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, democracy took off and flourished worldwide for about 15, 16 years, 1989 to 2005. And since 2006, for the last 11 years, more countries worldwide have declined in their democratic values and institutions than have improved. And that trend continues. Amongst those countries, we have many out there: Russia, Turkey, Indonesia, Myanmar, Vietnam, Venezuela, and the United States of America. You know, it used to be, especially in cultural exchange where we work, that we were the shining example of democratic light, the freedom for all, the liberty represented by the Statue of Liberty. But that seems to be wavering. We're not the leaders anymore that we should be in the true spiritual values underlying democratic principles. But take heart. There's a lot that can be done, and we're working on it. We're very grateful to the Fetzer Institute, who is our very generous sponsor for this conference. And they have initiated a work to heal the heart of American democracy. And we're working with them on this great, noble theme. So we want to thank Fetzer, and we want to talk about healing the heart of American democracy throughout the conference this weekend. Because I really feel if social transformation is going to take place, if we're going to reach deep and find our highest purpose, we can't do it if we don't have a true, functioning, healthy, inclusive, radical empathy democracy working for our best interests. So we're going to explore that throughout this conference and see if we can do our part to heal the way. But take heart, because social change doesn't need a majority of people. It's not all that democratic as far as the need for a 51% vote. And we all know that there's a kind of critical mass element in social transformation, and it doesn't take a majority. When the United States was founded in 1776, well, we didn't have Pew and Gallup surveys then, but historians estimate that at the most, 10% of the people in this country supported the idealistic values behind a democratic system, and maybe less, 8 to 10%. But yet, they created a revolution and a democratic model to move forward. So that's the way it's always worked. It's this dynamic core group based on higher truth that drives social change and will continue to do so in these critical times. Okay, trying to get our... So I'd like to talk about where we are today. This is an evolutionary wave, part of a theory that I've been working on for about 40 years, more or less. And I'm not sure that's, yeah. Yeah, but I think we had another slide before that. There we go, thank you. Before we get to the evolutionary wave, I want that to keep flowing in your minds. I'd like to talk a little bit about the problems and the depth of the crises we face today. So we have here an exponential growth and decline curve. I first saw this about 47 years ago. The first sociology class I had in college. And the professor drew these charts on the board. And what we have here on the bottom, you will see a growth curve going like this, going back to around the year 0, and then coming up in an exponential increase in growth. Growth of what? Well, population, armaments, environmental deterioration, technology, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I think you've seen these kinds of graphs. We know it's happening. But what it indicates is we get this increase of quantity over time, and we get to right now, and as it shoots straight upward, it's literally showing us that we're running out of time. Likewise, we have decline in curves, and we can plot in all kinds of things in there. The number of fish in the sea, the extension of coral reefs, the extension of rainforests and forested land, the level of our freshwater aquifers, the amount of topsoil in the world, et cetera, et cetera. We all know this. We know that the good things are declining, some of the not so good things are increasing, and we're running out of time. This was the case 47 years ago, 50 years ago. This was already being talked about a half century ago. Followed up, the Club of Rome published the book, The Limits to Growth, stating that we have this issue. My professor back in college said, this is going to take dynamic young people. He called it the poet graph, because he named it after population, overkill, environmental deterioration, and technology. And he said, this doesn't have a normal, linear, logical, rational solution. We can't really think this out and solve it with normal means. It's pure poetry. Every one of you is an artist, an old kind of engineer in your own mind, and a poet. Somehow we can dedicate ourselves and weave together the poetry of life to find our purpose and serve the needs to solve the problems so evident in these graphs. So we reach out to you all starting this conference to have that courage, have the vision within, to be your own poet, to guide your life, to write the greatest verses you've ever imagined and weave it together with your higher purpose to find out how you can best serve this cause. And so we have this evolutionary wave. Started with the big wow, and these downward trends on the wave here, this is material growth. This is the universe making itself, going from that big wow to stars, galaxies, planets, and then some miraculous thing happened. Life appeared on planet Earth, and that changed everything. This is no longer a dispersing entropic world that was part of the first 18 billion or 13 billion years. This is now negative entropy. This is life. This is growth. Biologists today still can't figure out or tell us, why does an embryo in the womb grow? What makes it turn into a human being? It's not based on the second law of thermodynamics, that we know. It's based on a driving life principle that here this weekend we're calling purpose. And it brought us through plants, animals, and all the way up to the peak of another wave, the crest of the crown jewel of the evolutionary trend, self-reflective consciousness, looking back on that big wow and finding another big wow in our own minds, like, wow, we're here, we're conscious, we have to do something about this. We had another growth process through the history of human civilization, hunter and gatherers, farming, city-states. These phases follow very distinct patterns. And it brought us to this point today, right now. The trough of the wave, again, equivalent to the point where life had to burst out of the material world. And now we have to find new life, the new paradigm. This is called so many things by so many different people. The Great Turning, Joanna Macy and David Corton. The Great Transition, Dwayne Elgin has called it. He'll be with us later today. The turning point, the tipping point, the once and future transformation is now. I often say in my talks, this is the fourth big miracle in the history of the universe. Indigenous traditions tell us there have been 3 great miracles up to now. That Big Bang, Big Wow, the appearance of life, the appearance of human consciousness, and now, right here in San Francisco, at the Purpose Summit, we realize this. It's not just important, it's not just critical to the survival of our species. This is the singular moment, the most important moment in all of human history. How many of you believe that? And the number's growing all the time. And the movements are growing. And the intersected cooperation amongst the movements is growing. I want to, I've skipped over here. Does this thing go backwards? Yeah. I want to, one more slide before that. Excuse me. There we go. So I want to talk just a minute about purpose, how it overlaps, what it really is. This is a very interesting Venn diagram described by one of the authors in the book over there, Purpose Rising. This is what your purpose is all about. To find that little label in the middle called ikigai, which is not an ikigai, that's a Japanese term for raison d'etre, your reason for being, why your soul was put on this planet at this time, the real core of your essence. And that's made up of this swirling, intersecting combination of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and yes, maybe what you can get paid to do, because it's practical. But there are a lot of jobs in the purposeful field, and there's a lot happening at the intersection in the core of your heart, the reason for your being. And that just happens, synchronistically enough, to be the symbol of the global purpose movement. So I think you can see these intersecting, interacting, interconnected sources of inspiration within our mindsets that combine together and help us find that deeper purpose. To solve the evolutionary declines and the exponential growth of so many things. And to push us through this once great, incredible transformation back on the upward curve the equivalent of life coming back. And that is what the task is before us this weekend. Finding the evolutionary life, making the great turn, stewarding our way through this great trough in the grand evolutionary wave, finding our purpose together, bringing it together, working in collaboration for a movement, not just this movement, it's all movements, it's everybody, communities collaborating together to really change the world for the better. So I feel a little bad. I don't want to leave us wallowing in the trough here at this incredibly complex time. So I'd like to just remind us that it's primarily perspective more than reality as to where we are in this trough. One of my favorite philosophers of all time was a sort of semi-mythical, legendary figure called the Mullah Nasruddin in the 13th century. And the Mullah had this kind of comic, simple way of putting complex situations into perspective. And he was very popular in the 13th century. And one day, there was a group of people out on a trek through the woods, trying to find their new way, perhaps their purpose in life. And they came upon a raging river. And it was deep and swift, like one of the big divides in life we often come upon. And they sat there and contemplated, how do we cross the river? How do we get to the other side? How do we navigate the trough? And then they saw the Mullah Nasruddin on the other side of the river. And they said, Mullah, Mullah, how do we get to the other side? And the Mullah stopped and looked across the river at him. He said, but you're already on the other side. Thank you all for being on the other side. Thank you all for having the perspective to know that the shift has already happened, that we are on the upward trend, that we are putting life back into our systems, that we are learning to upcycle and sustainably reproduce the post-growth era of human flourishing. So we're not in a trough if we see the light shining ahead and illuminating our inner purpose. We're on the uptrend towards a new life, a new paradigm, a very big wow in our own hearts. And we hope maybe this weekend that many of you might relive that big wow. You might have an original aha moment, a deeper perception of an old aha moment. That's what we're here for, to help you find that and then take it out into your communities. And so here, as we navigate the trough and we move towards this new life, this new way, this understanding of deeper purpose, there are so many people to help us. So many communities, organizations, hundreds of thousands of nonprofit organizations working worldwide to join this critical mass and in transformation.